Okay, good day everyone. My name is Coenie from Vermaak. I'm the Principal Solutions Architect at Dimension Data. And I want to talk a little bit about how to stay relevant in an ever-changing market. Okay, so there's obviously various reasons why companies don't stay relevant in the marketplace. There's no way that in 40 minutes I can cover them all, but some of the things I found quite pertinent, I'll be sharing with you guys, and we can discuss it as we go along. So some of the things we'll be looking at is the importance of staying relevant from a software solution perspective as well as from a business model perspective. We're going to look at why it's easy to fall behind the curve, and we're going to consider some stuff such as comfort zone, product roadmap emissions, resource and budget constraints, some often overlooked concerns and activities, which includes manual interventions, workarounds, out of sight, out of mind, and some dangerous assumptions that's made by technical teams and the business owners of the projects. And then we're going to look at some important considerations, such as development tools and methodologies, emerging technologies and upgrades and the impact of upgrades, roadmap planning and dealing with technical debt. We're going to consider the business versus development requirements, end user expectations, and then, of course, the important thing we're always concerned about is performance that we're going through technology upgrades. Lastly, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I do want to touch agile processes and the implication for software solutions and businesses. Okay, so to start off, the importance of staying relevant. So considering from a software solution and a business model perspective, as far as technical relevance goes, development tools. So advancements in technology can provide competitive advancements. Right? If you look at your development IDEs from 10, 15 years ago to the latest versions of Eclipse or Visual Studio, the enhancements that's just ships in the box to increase productivity is just really immense. If we don't stay up to date with those things, we're really making it very difficult for ourselves to be competitive in the market. We need to ensure relevance from a user experience and expectation perspective. I'm referring here to end user controls and UI rendering. It's quite easy to be stuck on older software. It's really dated as far as the user experience goes, but it does get the job done. However, the nature of end users and the experiences with software solutions is really changing quite a lot. And if we don't adapt to the newer requirements or the user requirements, we're going to be found wanting. Obviously, performance and security improvements, it's always a big thing and anything to look at, whether it is performance gains in shortening compile times or deployment times, integrating into CI/CD solutions, all of those, and securing our code base is really vital, because there's very few things that could hurt a company as much as losing the source of your main revenue stream, right? Development processes, new tools, new methodologies can improve efficiency and reduce complexity. And there's really a lot of clever people out there that's got nothing better to do than to sit and criticize what we as technical people do for a living and daily and how we can improve it. Some of the stuff is really good and life-changing, and it's things we need to keep in the back of our mind to ensure that as the pace of technology moves forward, as software developers can move with it. So the one thing that's really of a great concern in a lot of the projects that I've experienced in my life is development processes tend to include a lot of manual interventions, and we should really look at ways of automating those processes. A big misconception that I want to raise at this point is generally technical teams are really good with server updates and patches related to security and performance issues. However, if you look at the other side of the coin on our software solution, upgrading our frameworks and libraries we use is very often not considered worth the effort. Yet they're equally important as a security flaw in the framework or the library we use. can expose us as badly as a server that's not been patched properly. So important points to remember here is end user expectation is evolving constantly, not just because of interaction with our application, but interaction with similar applications or just really mainstream applications. Everyone is really interacting with the YouTubes, the Facebooks, the Netflixes of the world, and the ease of use in those applications and the type of navigation is really something that they get accustomed to. And they would expect that our solutions follow a similar trend, right? We need to minimize the interaction to get the result done. Creating and maintaining a secure solution should always be at the top of mind. I think I do touch on this a little bit later, but in the interim, I mean, you can think for yourself exactly how dangerous it would be if your customer data is exposed due to a security flaw and the implications financially and legally that would sit on your shoulders. So the other important thing that we tend to miss as software development houses is customers often rely on our solutions to enable innovation. So very often when we talk about innovation, we really look at it from our perspective in our internal companies to say, we need to innovate to create better application use, a better user experience for our customers. But we really need to remember that we just provide them with the tool to enable innovation in their businesses. And it's important for us to keep that in mind when we gather our requirements and develop our software. It's really a very important aspect that will keep our business and our software solution relevant if we can enable innovation for our partners. From a business perspective, obviously, first thing top of mind needs to be the customer. We need to understand and embrace the customer expectation and the customer experience. It is very important to balance the customer want and need in a cost-effective manner. Very often, the customer would want the be-all and end-all of shiny solutions. But the time and effort required to develop that is really not worth it. At the end of the day, the feature is not either developed or added to the software. Whereas if we step back and we really look at what is needed to solve the problem and we solve the want, there is generally a very scaled back version that we can provide in a cost and time effective manner that is generally quite profitable for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right? Another very important aspect to stay relevant is adaptability. Change in business is inevitable. And as technology evolves and we move into a more fast-paced, connected life, these change cycles tend to be a lot shorter. We need to move with the times very quickly as development houses and businesses. So something that's quite interesting, but businesses that embraces regular and rapid change and have found the recipe or the way to adapt to these changes really quickly tend to be more innovative and profitable. So another important aspect when we look at adaptable systems and companies and business processes is how we measure performance. So if we measure on the short term in an agile environment, we might find that we actually measure ourselves very negatively because we tend to fail quite often. But that is the nature of agile development, right? We get requirements, we implement something, we see if it works, we tweak it. So performance should rather be measured in the long run to see after the project or piece of code has been implemented and tested and tweaked to the way where it should be to see the long-term efficiency and effectiveness rather than short-term performance. Innovation is always an important thing for a business to stay relevant, and it makes competition irrelevant, right? So if we focus on small improvements to our system, to our solutions, that can very easily be replicated by our competitors and really doesn't give us that edge that we want. However, innovative solutions differentiate and provides competitive advantage. So the greater our innovation that we put into our product, and the more bespoke that innovation, the more difficult it is to replicate by our competition. And obviously, the more it puts us on the front foot to actually extend our advantage. So just in summary on the business relevance, managing consumer relationships is vitally important, be it from a financial perspective, from a long-term partnering perspective, from a responding to requirements perspective. We really need to stay close to our customer. Something that was a very interesting and big upset in the agility required in business was the COVID-19 pandemic. And there will be future pandemics that will have a similar effect. I mean, just considering the interaction we had at our own business at Dimension Data and with our customers, we were literally in the office one day, next day everyone's working remotely, running around to find ways to collaborate the way we did. And within a couple of weeks, everything settled down so nicely that life is really as it was before the pandemic. And I'm sure everyone attending this conference can actually relate to this story and think of many examples on how this was implemented. And the companies that responded to this in the most timely fashion actually ended up really successful and set to move forward. The other important thing is markets are ready for new and more cost-effective solutions. So what I mean by that is the market really likes technical innovation. The more new things we bring to the forefront, the more people consume it, and the better we set ourselves up. So why is it easy to fall behind the curve? So the first thing to look at is that we're stuck in a comfort zone, right? So why do we end up in a comfort zone? The first reason is our business processes are mature and stable. So our company has been running for many years. We've got a really good profit margin. The software is pretty stable, and we can focus on rolling out incremental feature enhancements that our customers want. The problem is, if we sit in this zone for far too long, we actually fall behind the competition so bad from a feature perspective that is really difficult to catch up. So from being the market leader, you end up chasing the solution the whole time. And considering it from a technology perspective and a skills perspective of our staff, if we sit in that mold for too long, the upskilling process and the upgrading of our software, our libraries and the frameworks and our development tools really becomes quite a big mission. So what we need to do to manage this better is to ensure that we have a proper roadmap that we can plan and implement that minimize instability. And we actually plan for technology upgrades and the introduction of new technologies and new frameworks as part of our roadmap, and not just consider the future enhancements we need to do. So the second reason is that our revenue and customer base is stable and growing. So what we need to understand there is we need to accept the fact that customer loyalty can change if expectations is not met. We need to understand the opportunities and really work towards almost providing the solution before the problem is there. If we can get into that space, as technologists, we know we're moving in the right direction. Another big reason, and this is quite interesting to me because this is one of those that don't just span either business or technical, it actually spans across the board, is the fear of change. And that also relates to our customers that may actually push back to say, we don't need to upgrade at this point because everything is working and it's stable, our staff is trained, they're used to everything. So what we need to do for that is just understand and mitigate the effect of change. Do proper change management and hand over from our dev teams through our business teams, right through our customers, and the fear of change can really be managed in that way. A big mistake companies can make is that mistakes is reprimanded, not seen as learning opportunities. I think we've all been there and we all understand that mistakes happen. Sometimes, I mean, they do have severe consequences, and we need to put mitigation strategies in place to ensure that we can catch the really devastating mistakes and actually turn them into learning opportunities as people make mistakes. Fear of failure is another reason for keeping us in our comfort zone. And again, failure should be seen as a learning process and should not be reprimanded. Processes need to be put in place to minimize the cost of failures. The road to change is rocky and risky. One way to manage that is create an R&D competency within your technical teams. attend conferences like we're doing at the moment, and join technical forums. At least that'll enable you to know about and understand not just the technology, but how other teams and other companies have overcome similar problems, and guide you on a way forward that will really help you to make the road less arduous. Not appreciating the fact that the comfort zone is hampering innovation. Now, if you're stuck on that plateau long enough in your comfort zone, this is really something that is a reality and can really hurt you quite badly. So one way to overcome this is to constantly think and talk about your business offering. And when I say talk about it, I mean from both a business and a technical perspective. And even for the business teams to cross-skill the technical teams a little bit, and the technical teams cross-skilling the business people a little bit, with conversations on why it's a good thing to progress through technology and implement newer technologies or upgrade to the latest version of the software, or even why we need to implement a specific feature or specific UI or whatever it is. So actively investigating and participating in technology and technology discussions is really very important to ensure that we don't get stuck in that comfort zone. So when companies have a good market share, it's easy to become complacent and not pay enough attention to the solutions or products that make them successful. This opens the door to competitors and competing solutions, which leads to delay or no technology upgrades. The longer this is done, the more compounded issues or complexities become. And that last point is really something I want to elaborate on a little bit more. So if we do not upgrade our frameworks, our libraries, operating systems, whatever piece of technology it is that we need to consider and stay up to date, the longer we keep it, the risk that we're creating is really just so big. Framework or libraries implement so many new features and depreciate certain features, which could lead to quite a large effort in refactoring your code before you can move forward. You could also run out of support on a specific version of the software or the library. And that is all just creating a risk in your business and your solution that you really do not need. Innovations in companies and solutions trapped in the comfort zone are low to non-existent. And again, by virtue of being stuck in a comfort zone, I mean, if everyone perceives that everything is working the way it should, and no one is challenging the status quo, well, there's going to be no innovation. It's going to be day-to-day business, and you're going to sit where you sit for eternity. Okay, resource and budget constraints. So tight budgets and technical spend is not a priority. Very often when the C-level execs or your senior management is more towards the business side and not the technical side, they would apply a lot of time and planning and really good strategies towards sound business processes and principles, but they don't understand necessarily the required technical spend or investment that's required. I mean, that relates to newer hardware for testing certain features, having the right hardware to test all the features of the application, upskilling and training your staff and your development team to keep them current, sending them to conferences and stuff like that. So as a resolution, the risk and disadvantages to relating to not upgrading technology frameworks and libraries must be clearly communicated. So if the technical people or technical teams don't interact with their business leaders enough and highlight some of the issues or potential pitfalls, I mean, it'll literally just be blown past the execs, and they'll look at their business model to ensure profitability. And really, that's what our business teams are there for. From a technical perspective, it is really our responsibility to talk to the business people and help them understand the requirement for the investment. Implementation plan and requirements must be articulated for the short, medium, and long term to ensure that the required budget can be allocated and our teams can get the training that they need. So resource constraints. To keep spend under control, teams generally run very lean. And if teams do not actively participate in technology events, they're very often unaware of the technological advancements that happen around them. So one way to mitigate that is to ensure or create a capacity and knowledge and technical teams to consistently monitor and address technical shortcomings and upgrades that will be required, and create R&D capabilities tasked to monitor technology stack and the relevance. Project-based resourcing. So project scope and resources are planned to get the job done. For me, this is a really important thing, and it's a very tough thing to discuss with your customer when you do project-based resourcing. Because ultimately, they pay for a piece of work to solve a specific problem, and really are not concerned about any technical housekeeping that needs to be done on your end. Also, customers don't generally understand the need for and the time requirements for system maintenance. So it's really important when resourcing or planning for projects that you ensure that you actually scope and plan for technology upgrades, if there's any training requirements for your teams, not necessarily as part of the build for time, but at least time must be available for your teams to address the issues that occur. Otherwise, you're going to end up in an endless loop of your team having to work overtime, guys getting burnt out. Really not a good place to be. So plan for it up front. Also, clearly state and communicate and even educate your customer in the relevance and the importance of the upgrades. Very often, your customer is just not aware or fully understands the implications of not upgrading or the benefits for upgrading. If you clearly communicate that with them, very often the capacity is created for you to do the required work you need to do. Invest in training and technology. Ensure that training agreements are in place with your customers to get the downtime you need to send your team, and have the discussion with your customers that the principle of it's working, so why change it is really not a good mentality to be, because it's working today. But in 5 years from now, if we don't do anything or stay current with our technology and market demands, your solution is going to become obsolete. And sad to say, but customer loyalty only goes that far. So at the point where your solution is obsolete, your customer will probably just find a solution that better fits their needs. So it's important to ensure that your teams are kept up to date with emerging technologies, and there should be budget provisioned to ensure that the necessary R&D can be done, and a clear product and business roadmap needs to be created to facilitate this. So why do product roadmap omissions occur? So really it's because of three things, right? So it's a disconnect between technology, where business and technical teams does not follow technology roadmaps, and there's no awareness of changing landscapes. Technology upgrades would be omitted from the product roadmap. So this is an understanding thing. If the teams don't understand that there's a requirement or a need to upgrade their technology to stay current or to upgrade their skills, it just won't be done. There's a disconnect with the customer base. So the business and technical teams consider themselves as service providers and not solution providers. And for me, this is really important and speaks back to the point I mentioned earlier, where we need to enable our customers to innovate with the solutions we provide. If we see ourselves just as a service provider, we're really going to put a piece of software out there, let them use it every day, and life goes on for everyone. If we see ourselves as solution providers, we will work with our customers to ensure that they can innovate and grow their businesses, which in turn will mean that we will have a good market share in our industry, and that we will remain relevant as a software provider. So there's no consideration for the customer business roadmap requirements. So again, very often, even though we do discuss requirements with our customers and we develop software based on their input, we don't really consider the roadmap the customer is on and the timeframes everything needs to fit in for them to achieve their strategic goals. And it's really important for us as solution providers to really stay close to the customer and not fall into this trap. The third disconnect is not following market trends. So product roadmaps plan for customers' services alone, not considering market trends and future requirements. So we're really talking about the customer has a problem today. They've got in the back of their mind how they want it solved. and not really thinking where their business is going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time, and the type of solution we need to implement to facilitate that. It's something I speak about a little bit more in my presentation I'm doing tomorrow. But if we don't design our solutions for proper extendability, it becomes a really big effort to change your software that could introduce instability in your solution. We're following the trends up front, planning for it, and developing our solutions in a way that's easily extendable. Not necessarily saying that we need to implement every single possible scenario we can think of at this point. We obviously need to be cognizant of what is required, but also about what would be required in the future and how we can extend our solution to accommodate that. R&D and innovation resources are allocated and used for quick feature development. Unfortunately, this is something that I've seen a couple of times too many in my life already. So businesses understand, and the business leaders understand, that there is a requirement for R&D and innovation teams to ensure that our solution is relevant and future-proof our solution. However, if you look at it from a financial perspective, your R&D team is really just an outright cost to the business. So it is very tempting just to squeeze in a quick feature release into their pipeline to ensure we can deliver some value to our customers. Maybe it's something we can license additionally and get a bit of revenue from. But the more we do that, it kind of becomes a habit or a norm. And over time, we lose our R&D or our innovation capability, which also has dire effects for our business and our solution. The other reasons for technology upgrades being omitted from the product roadmap. So technology is not considered a core deliverable. Generally, this means that it becomes very difficult to find time for upgrades, and your solution would age quite rapidly. The complexity of technology upgrades does not fit Agile environments and considered too time-consuming to handle the perceived roadmap. Something that's very important for us to understand and manage is, yes, upgrading technology and frameworks is not a trivial exercise. There is big complexity in it, and generally it will not fit within a week or 2 week sprint, considering all the testing that needs to be done and refactoring and all of that. However, if we plan that into our roadmap and we have a parallel stream that can deal with this, it is something that can happen. So this should really not be an excuse. Multiple short-term roadmaps can lead to short implementation scope, which is really great for your agility and delivering your solution. However, it also removes the opportunity or the time to implement technology upgrades. Like I alluded to earlier, upgrading software is very seldom a smooth run-through wizard exercise. There's always something that doesn't work that you catch in testing, and extensive testing is required to ensure that the upgrade is successful. Then there's also the fact that companies tend to be more concerned with the current customer demands rather than the future demands. Having a look at manual interventions, time is one of our most valuable commodities. It's the one thing that we can never get back. So if we just look at elements such as your continuous integration and continuous deployments, quality control and testing, database management and monitoring, all of these are really good candidates for some form of automation. It's very unlikely that you will have full automation across all of these categories. But it's also some of the areas that I've seen the most manual interventions and workarounds that can really hamper your productivity and your means to respond to requirements. So things to consider is manual interventions tend to create a dependency on a specific person or team. Humans are prone to making errors when under pressure, and they tend to be time-consuming activities compared to an automated solution. You also have limited monitoring and traceability. So really, as good as it is for someone to intervene and get something done, and we all do it, it's really putting ourselves and our solution at risk, not to try and automate and have a repeatable process where we eliminate the need for a specific person or team and remove the potential for errors that can happen. Very important consideration is whenever deadlines are tight, manual interventions are great candidates for omissions or mistakes. If people are under pressure to deliver something, it is really quite easy just to drop off a task or make a mistake in the process, which could lead to a really bad deployment and ultimately lead to a very bad customer experience. Touching on workarounds, one example I could think of is the enums that was introduced in 11.6 and moving forward, and how it was used before that, and self-patching of a function in a framework or a library. Not that the way in which either of these are implemented is really a bad thing in all circumstances. It may work really well, and you may have a really elegant solution. What is needed is to understand whether this workaround would be kept in your solution for eternity, or do you consider it to be technical debt and it needs to be refactored at some point. So the major problem with workarounds are that they tend to become permanent. When code lands in production, it tends to stay there. If it works, people leave it. If the workaround relates to CI/CD and manual intervention is required, inconsistencies in the environment can be created. And those are also the more difficult problems to troubleshoot, right? Like I said, it tends to create technical debt. Avoid workarounds or the consequences where possible by planning a migration or refactoring strategy in your product roadmap. Follow best practice methods for requirements gathering, development, testing, and deployment. So let's look at some dangerous assumptions of some things that if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So if you've heard any of the following, right? There's no need to upgrade, or it's stable and running. What is the chances of this impacting us? And it's always been like that. It's important for you to keep the following at the top of mind and articulate it to the required teams. So vendor software libraries and framework updates contains important enhancements as well as bug fixes related to security, performance, and feature set. All three of those are things that's really critical to stay up to date with and ensure the stability of your solution. The longer the delay between upgrades, the more difficult it becomes. Plan sufficient time between feature releases for upgrades. It always takes longer than it says on the box, and it requires extensive testing. It is never the obvious things that don't work, and that is so true. So some considerations around development tools and methodologies. The tool set that is available to the development team can severely limit productivity. Having the best skills for the job does not replace inadequate tools. Using mainstream development tools makes the onboarding of new developers easier. It is vitally important that the chosen tool set supports the development methodology. When the development methodology is agile and your development tools do not allow for concurrent development and merging, it will be a struggle to meet the deadlines and to be truly agile. So again, and this is something where business owners tend to complicate life for the technical teams quite a bit. Everyone likes the hype around being agile and responding quickly to our customers, and promises are made and teams need to deliver. However, the tools that is required to actually deliver the functionality that's required does not align with the process and what is required. And no matter what you do from a human capital or intellect perspective, if you're not using the right tool for the job, you will really struggle to overcome all the challenges that's going to be thrown your way. Similarly, when your solution consists of multiple technologies and different tools must be used for each, the effort of making it all works becomes a burden on the development team. So not to say that you shouldn't consider multiple technologies for your solution. Very often it's really a viable way of implementing things. What you need to do is just understand the trade-offs and implement processes that mitigates the risks and the complexities around the multiple technologies. Careful consideration should be made when third-party integration is required to make your development tools work. You may not have control over bug fixes, and feature enhancements may not be accessible until an upgrade of both tools and integration is done. So what I'm alluding to here is something like using very bespoke third-party source code repositories that needs to integrate in a very specific way with your framework, And both of those components are out of your own control. So you may end up that you want to do a technology upgrade on the one hand, or the one vendor wants to do an upgrade, but for some reason the other one doesn't or can't. You're going to be stuck in the middle with in a situation where you sit on obsolete technology that cannot be upgraded due to no fault of your own. So it's something to be cognizant of. So emerging technologies and upgrades. In order to stay relevant in an ever-changing technology landscape, it's essential to keep an eye on emerging technologies. Take care to understand the implication for implementation, skill, time, and effort. So what I mean by that is it is really great to see Netflix or any other application implement a new feature or all the nice buzz things we see when we look at the conferences and stuff. But understand where your business and your team is at from a skill perspective, and how long it will take to upskill your team, any effort required to upgrade not only the technology, but the tool set you're using, business processes you're using. Implementation is really important to consider when introducing new technologies. You need to fully understand whether it's an actual requirement for your customer or for your business, or if it's something that is really just a hype that everyone's on about that could die out in the next couple of months. Not an easy thing to see from the get-go. Sometimes you're going to get it right, sometimes you're going to get it wrong. But make an educated decision and stand by your decision whichever way you go, whether it's a requirement or not. Consider whether it's going to be a value add to your solution or your business. And what would the consequences be for not implementing the technology? So once we understand and manage these requirements or these implications, we will be in a position where we can really determine if it's something that's going to be required for our solution and what the impact would be if we don't implement it, have a delayed implementation, or if we need to do it immediately. From a technology perspective, it's essential to understand the complexities of your environment and plan your upgrades carefully. Not upgrading technologies used will create risk. You could have security vulnerabilities that the new release patches, not benefiting from performance enhancements, and outdated technology becomes very difficult to upgrade. You could end up running out of support and maintenance, and it'll probably just be Murphy's law that as soon as you're out of maintenance, you would hit an issue where you really require the expertise of the vendor, and obviously that's no longer supported. So what is a roadmap? So a roadmap is high-level vision and goals for the solution or product over the next period. It's a strategic plan used to outline future product functionality and timelines. Ensure that your technology upgrades and refactoring is in the roadmap. I can't stress this enough. Very often, business and technical teams have a different vision on your roadmap and how it should be used. Ensure that both teams are on the same page and they have the same definition for what they're planning and how they're going to implement. Way too often, product roadmaps only include feature enhancements, no time or resources allocated for stabilization, refactoring, or technology upgrades. The implications of this omissions include, obviously, no planned time or resource to address issues, project delays and suboptimal deployments to production, because there's always going to be quick fixes to address things. And even if you have to implement a quick fix, if it wasn't considered in the first place, you're going to have a project delay. Unexpected side effects due to non-compliance of your operating system software. So if you're sitting on a really old version of your operating system and deploying the latest and greatest vendor software, or even the other way around, certain features may not behave the way you expect. And obviously, because of all of this, your solution will deprecate faster than what is planned or anticipated, and you really become irrelevant in the marketplace. So a constant cycle of costly modernization projects will have to be entered to address these issues and to try and hack your way into staying relevant. You'll always create continuous frustration for end users and potentially hampering technology vision or roadmap of your customers. Again, hampering their ability to innovate in their business areas. So business versus development requirements. So from business perspective, The primary business goals would be lowering operational expense, increasing market share, customer satisfaction, etc., etc. Looking towards technology to provide the competitive advantage and increased agility. That's all really great when it's put in words, but if it's not articulated, understood from the technical team to the business teams on how to achieve these goals, you're going to end up with problems as well. Development requirements would be, are you planning to be in the bleeding edge of technology, or are you going to follow a more measured approach? So will you upgrade literally the minute the new operating system is released, the moment the new library or framework version is released? And what is the implications and benefits of doing so? Or do you rather want to stick back a version, let them resolve all the teething issues, and what would be the impact of doing that? Will it be possible to upgrade all your customers at the same time, or can you support multiple versions of your software? And this is a really important aspect to understand when you look at your time management and your communication to customers to guide them through the process. Then what must be included in the development or technology roadmap to ensure the technology will achieve the business goals? So naturally, between everything in life, and especially business and development requirements, there's trade-offs. So define and balance the nice to have with the need to have to minimize risk. Balance operational requirements with technology requirements, and create a clearly defined and motivated plan outlining the business and development requirements that is aligned with both your business and technical teams to ensure a single vision for your solution. So important considerations from an end user expectation perspective is, and some important end user behavior includes users form expectations based on their experience with similar kinds of software. So I've alluded to this earlier in the presentation when I spoke about the Facebooks, the Netflix, whatever is out there. People get used to things and they expect your application to behave in a similar way. At the core of user expectation is ensuring that the users find value in the provided solution. For most users, you get one chance to get it right. The stakes are incredibly high. Times really have changed, and it's becoming more so in shorter periods of time. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, users would tolerate a lot because there was no competition out there. These days, if someone downloads an app, uses application or functionality, a website, application, whatever, and it's not adding value to their life immediately, or doesn't fit with their mental model of what it should do, they really just move on to the next piece of software, which could also be really damaging for your solution. User expectations evolve over time due to changing usage circumstances, technology advancements, innovation, and wider user context. Some of the user expectations may result from user interactions with other systems. Ultimately, all software is developed as a tool of convenience for end users, and therefore it is essential to adapt to the changing user behavior and requirements. So just quickly on performance and technology upgrades. Sometimes upgrades include major performance enhancements and should be applied as soon as practically possible. Technology upgrades does not only include new versions of current technology. If there is a fit-for-purpose technology that outperforms the current solution that you're implementing, consider incorporating that to give the agility and the required lifespan to your application. Whatever you do, ensure that your technology choice and upgrade path does not lead to a degradation in performance. End users will tolerate a lot. However, each individual annoyance eventually adds up to a point where the solution is considered to be suboptimal. One of the worst combinations you can have is a buggy system with limited features that is slow to respond to end user requests. So lastly, I quickly want to touch the Agile process and implication for businesses. So there's no argument that self-organizing teams and the breakdown of organizational silos is a good thing. And in principle, companies and teams that adopt Agile methodologies with the best of intentions. Where it becomes convoluted and very often comes apart at the seams is with your technology choices, right? So your development environment does not really adhere to or assist in your Agile development processes and deployment processes. Your project resourcing is based on fixed time and effort, where the reality is the project requirements keeps on changing. Sprints or efforts are only focusing on delivering features and no capacity is created for system maintenance and innovation. And when those are introduced, project overruns are being introduced. Even though your development is delivered incrementally, deployment to production is still batch, which still really means even though you're developing in an agile way, you're actually not an agile business. So every organization and even software solution is different. And there's no one size fits all for implementing agile. It's important that the trade-offs are understood and the methodology ultimately followed is best suited to the situation and your application and not because everyone else is doing it. So in summary, it's important to fully understand and challenge the reasons we do things. Comprehensively and consistently plan our product roadmaps, including upgrading of technology tools and processes. Challenge ourselves so as to not get stuck in a comfort zone. Always keep end user expectations and their end users and their expectations in mind. Consider both business and technical requirements. And the agile methodology for delivering software is great as long as the tools and processes utilized aligns with the strategy. I think if we keep all of these things in mind, we're well on our way to for our businesses and our solutions to stay relevant in a changing market. So over to questions if there is any.
Yeah, I'm just looking into, and actually there is no question, just one comment from Tim. The book Innovator's Dilemma is a good discussion on recognizing and fighting back upstarts competitors in a mature market.
Okay, that's a very fair point.
So maybe something to think about, but yeah, that's it.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And
we did. Thank you for presenting and have a good afternoon and evening.
Thank you. Same to everyone else on the call. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.